Hello and welcome to Stocks Down Under. My name is Mark Kinnis, and today we're joined by Henk-Jan Boele, the CEO of BlinkLab. Hello, Henk-Jan, how are you going?
Good. Thanks for having me, Mark.
So talk to us about BlinkLab. Before we jump into any questions, talk to us about BlinkLab, who you guys are, what you guys do, and also what you're trying to accomplish with your technology.
So who we are. So BlinkLab, we started at the end of 2021 as a Princeton University spin-out. We pulled together a team of neuroscientists, medical doctors, software developers with one big goal, and that is basically to make state-of-the-art neuroscience useful, meaningful in everyday life. So many of our team members have been closely working together for many years. Which is great for our dynamics in the team. And together we share that passion for innovation. And what we are building is basically an AI-powered smartphone platform that will help clinicians to diagnose autism and ADHD. And our mission is to make that pediatric developmental care more accessible and more affordable. So when you think about Australia, for instance, I think that's a good example. NDIS is spending over $7 to $8 billion a year on autism diagnosis and care. And that's staggering, right? And by working closely together with healthcare providers, families, we have designed a solution that is not just scientifically advanced and very attractive, but it also works in the real world. And our goal is to basically eliminate those long wait lists. And right now, families often have to wait for years in order to get an autism diagnosis, which is especially true in Australia, unfortunately. And another thing that we're doing is basically we're introducing those more objective measures instead of just relying on subjective assessments for autism. So it's basically practical applications, a lot of customer discovery, iterating the product through many rounds of developing, and basically balancing the science with usability. That's what we're doing.
All right. And can you talk a little bit about how the technology works? Because it sounds like it's a massive opportunity, right? If you're spending, what was it, 8 billion you mentioned, and you have to wait years for diagnosis as a patient. So can you sort of at a high level talk about what the technology does and how it sort of speeds up the process?
Yep. So basically, BlinkLab has three core ingredients. The first one is smartphone technology. So we are using accessible technology. The second ingredient is AI that we use for basically analyzing the data. But the third ingredient, I think that's the one that makes us really unique, is that fundamental neuroscience, right? Decades of research back up basically our approach. And we have built our patents carefully around basically these key insights in how the brain processes sensory information. So basically what we have developed is a smartphone app that wherein the child is watching a video, just a video. There's no questionnaires involved. The testing takes about 15 minutes. And every now and then, while the child is watching that video, the app plays a brief, unexpected sound that kind of surprises the child. It's a little bit annoying. It's not too bad, but it's just enough to kind of grab the attention and to evoke a response. For instance, a blink or a twitch in the eye. And while the child reacts, the app uses the selfie camera and the microphone to record the responses. And we talk about eye movements and eye blinks, for instance. And why this is important is because we know from neuroscience that we can use these reactions to link them to specific brain functions that all have to do with sensory processing. And that's also why we named ourselves BlinkLab, right? Because we use the eye blinks really as a window into the brain.
Right.
And so I can keep talking about this for hours, but stop me.
So how did you first get the idea for BlinkLab? Because it sounds very sort of logical, but to sort of incorporate all that into a phone app, that's a completely new ballgame, I guess.
Absolutely. So it all started with my work as a neuroscientist, a medical doctor. So I've been using this type of neurometric testing for many years already in the lab. At one point, we even outfitted a mobile camper van to bring these labs directly to people. Funny story, sponsored by Dell and Intel. We learned a lot about outside testing, but I think the real accelerator, the real turning point was the COVID pandemic. I was doing my postdoc at Princeton with Professor Sam Wong, Casey Lou Williams, and then campus went in complete shutdown because of the COVID pandemic. And so I couldn't do my experiments anymore with the kids. And because I hate sitting still, I called my brother, who is now the CTO of the company, who's a great programmer. And I told him, why can we, let's try this on a smartphone, right? Let's do the type of testing and bring it to patients, bring it to families. So we hacked together some crappy piece of code. We tested it, and it looked way better than we expected, the data. So we showed it to Princeton. They immediately saw the potential. Within a week, we had a provisional patent filed. And we had funding from the university base to build a proper app. So it's really a mix of necessity, curiosity, but also having fun and to drive, and I think a really strong drive to bring neuroscience out of the lab into the real world to families.
Right. And since that time, you've come a long way because you're now planning to file for FDA approval. So 510K, I think it is. What does it mean, and what sort of steps? What's the timeline involved here to get to that point?
Yep. Yes, indeed. So we are working on 510K clearance, which is essential for medical devices to make sure that they meet the safety and efficacy standards that are set by the FDA. And basically, our app is in this category of software as a medical device. And we're on track with the FDA study. So just before Christmas, we had a really productive meeting with the FDA. According to our CRO, it was one of the best meetings they ever had. FDA did not raise any red flags, and actually they were complimenting us on the well thought out experimental design, study design. And according to our CRO, that was a really good starting point, and basically gave us the green light to continue with the study. So we've submitted the protocol approved by ethics. Now we're onboarding clinical sites that will collect the data in the US, and data collection is about to start and will continue for roughly a year. And then after the data collection, we'll send the data to the FDA, and they will take roughly half a year to review the data. So basically, at the end of 2025, we kind of know the final study results. Mid-2026, we will know the answers to basically know the answer from the FDA about clearance.
Right. And this process is much faster than the typical phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials you have with drugs, right?
Absolutely, it's way faster. I mean, it's basically testing the efficacy of a diagnostic adjunct. So that's way quicker than going through all the phase 1, 2, or 3 clinical trials. Absolutely.
Right. Okay. And so you talked about the market in Australia, at least how much is being spent on autism and the detection and treatment, et cetera, and diagnosing. The US obviously is a much bigger market. Can you talk a little bit about the addressable market and also especially for the US what their reimbursement pathway looks like? So essentially how you guys get paid in the end.
Exactly. So the addressable market is pretty vast, right? In the US alone, roughly 3.5 million kids are born each year. And what's interesting is that the American Pediatric Association, APA, recommends that each child is screened for neurodevelopmental delays at least twice during development. I think it's around 18 months and 24 months. So that's baseline, right? That's not our recommendation, that's theirs. And of course, we're not focusing only on the US, right? We're also targeting Europe and Australia, where we run really big studies. And what's also interesting that we also run studies in South Africa and Africa, right? There's growing awareness of autism in these countries as well, in these continents, with unique opportunities. So actually, it's basically a global issue that we're trying to solve. For the reimbursement you were asking, right? I mean, in the beginning, we would be taking this hybrid model with out-of-pocket pricing and followed by insurance integration. So roughly, BlinkLab test will be priced around $200 which is substantially lower than the traditional cost for diagnosis that are now roughly between $2,000 and $5,000. And basically, we'll be partnering with insurance companies and apply for CPT codes, basically supported by our health economic analysis that show that you can reduce medical expenses substantially through a more streamlined diagnostic process. So that's basically the process. So it's basically reducing the number of unnecessary doctor visits, visits to the psychologist, occupational therapist, physiotherapist, audiologist. And basically, it's important for us that parents get their answers more quickly. That's something that they really need.
Right. Okay. And so you said it's a test potentially to be run on every child that's born, potentially twice a year. So it's not dependent on parents suspecting there may be something their child may have autism, but it's actually sort of really objective screening everyone. And so there's also
Yep.
the chance that one of these kids will sort of, skip or sort of go through or may not be diagnosed properly. That chance is also very much diminished, I guess.
Yeah, so basically it's building a tool for screening, right? You want to empower the pediatrician and the family. And of course, we still need a formal DSM-5 diagnosis, but BlinkLab will be an adjunct, will be a diagnostic aid.
Okay. So for anyone watching this, they'll will have picked up on the two people with Dutch accents, if they listen carefully. So you're not based in Australia. You're Dutch yourself. Company's based in the Netherlands, if I'm correct. Um, what made you decide to list on ASX? Because for this type of technology, I'm betting there's plenty of other options for funding out there.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And just to make sure, right? I mean, we are not based in the Netherlands. We do a lot of the development in the Netherlands, but we are based in Australia. But yes, interesting question, right? I mean, BlinkLab started as a Princeton University startup, right? And from the start, the plan was to go for an early IPO because one of our co-founders, Anton Uverov, was based in Australia and he was quite successful with other companies, helping them basically list on the ASX. And along the way, I think you're right, we got quite some interest from VCs, not only in the US, but also in Europe. At some point, we even signed a term sheet. We went through the whole due diligence process. But at the same time, we had this opportunity to list on the ASX, right? And that was extremely exciting. And basically, a part of the equation was, of course, that ASX would give us easy access to capital, which is huge, especially for biotech, early biotech, right? And what I'm seeing right now is that many companies in the US are struggling, early companies with VC funding. And of course, it gives us also more credibility, right? I think having that public reporting and transparency with the quarterly and the yearly is great. And speaking about visibility, right? I think the appetite for biotech in Australia is very high, right? I've been to a few biotech conferences presenting BlinkLab, and the enthusiasm from the community has been quite overwhelming. There's a clear desire, I think, in Australia for innovation in this space. And I think we're in kind of a prime position to meet that. Another thing I want to mention is that I think the BlinkLab story is something that resonates, right? There are so many families out there struggling with autism and ADHD. And I think the solution that we are offering has the potential to make a real impact. I think that's a story worth telling. It's the one I think that we can share with our investors and stakeholders through ASX listing. And I think we benefit from basically that story that resonates way more on the ASX than, let's say, in the VC world.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right about that, definitely. So last question, Henk-Jan. Share price right now is 27 cents. If you look at 2025 and maybe even into 2026, what are the milestones that investors can look forward to or share price catalysts?
Well, of course, there will be updates on the regulatory study, right? This is one of the most critical milestones. Will be in progress. I think the investors will get really good insights in how the study is unfolding regarding the recruitment process, the partnerships with centers in the US, right? I think this is a big indicator also of how quickly and smoothly things are advancing towards, let's say, full market approval. There will be updates on the European mental health care provider collaborations. So we have a collaboration with one of the biggest players in mental health care in Europe. A very interesting, exciting collaboration with big potential commercial benefits. There is, of course, new collaborations, new partnerships, right? Because BlinkLab is kind of a platform technology. We are also onboarding all the universities that use our platform for their own studies. There's really interesting work done on neurodegenerative conditions together with Erasmus Medical Center. And with neurodegenerative, I mean autism and frontotemporal dementia. And of course, there's the European approval, right? I mean, in parallel with the FDA study, we are working with a notified body in Europe on CE approval. So I think there's a lot of interesting stories that we will share with our investors. Also, I want to share that I'm really grateful for the confidence that the investors have shown in us so far, right? I mean, a lot of trust, support. So I'm really excited to continue sharing our progress and to reach those important milestones in 2025.
All right, exciting times ahead. Henk-Jan Boele, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. It was a great pleasure.